Get ready for That Football Show with those fantasy guys.
Hello and welcome to That Football Show with those fantasy guys.
And we are those fantasy guys.
We certainly are. It's week number 6 in the NFL, and that means week number 6 on That Football Show with those fantasy guys. Jay, how's your fantasy season going?
My fantasy season is going well. My team is overachieving, which is always nice. My team is not nearly as good as my record, so hopefully we can straighten that out, because I'd rather be on this side than have a team who is better than the record indicates.
Yeah, right. Like my team, which is good on paper, terrible on Sunday. So with that, let's get right into key injuries for week number 6. There are a ton of them. Bunch of quarterbacks on the injured reserve list. On the injury list, not injured reserve. Cam Newton, Matt Stafford, Sam Bradford, Tom Brady, Derek Carr, Marcus Mariota. Most of those guys practiced today. Jonathan Stewart, Ty Montgomery practiced. Bob Powell did not. Jordy Nelson did. Stephon Diggs did not. Odell Beckham and Brandon Marshall on IR. Devontae Parker and Charles Clay. Hey, who's jumping off the list after this week?
I mean, the big names on the list, Tom Brady, obviously, Cam Newton, but Odell Beckham is the one that is out for the year, so that hurts. I mean, got injuries like that, injuries to Dalvin Cooks is just killing teams out there.
Yeah, I actually sustained those injuries in back-to-back weeks. Dalvin Cook and now Odell Beckham, and my team that looks good on paper looks worse on paper and is still crap on the field. So, with that, let's move into the Hunt for Red October.
Finding the ultimate sub.
Alrighty, so on a bye this week, the teams are the Buffalo Bills, the Cincinnati Bengals, the Seattle Seahawks, and the Dallas Cowboys. The fantasy relevant players are?
AJ Green just went off last week. Ezekiel Elliott struggling, not playing like he did last year. Obviously, hopefully you didn't have LaShawn McCoy because you watched That Football Show with those fantasy guys in our preseason and you stayed away from him like we said. But the guy that is going to benefit most from this, Joe Mixon. When he comes back, he's going to be entrenched as a starter, and you are going to have a fantasy stud from week 7 to the rest of the year.
I still want to see it. I want to see it. I want Joe Mixon to prove it to me.
Come back week 7.
Just like I keep asking for Amari Cooper to prove it to me.
And just like you keep telling me that Todd Gurley is not going to prove it to you.
Hey, last week Todd Gurley didn't prove it to me.
1 week out of 5.
The downturn has come.
Okay, we'll
see. All right,
see.
that's all I have to say about that. Let's move on to last week's picks. Jay, who'd you have?
Last week I straight crushed it coming off an injury. I told you Wolf Fuller is the guy to get for last week and for the future, and that's been proven to fruition. Last week he had 5 receptions, 57 yards, 2 dazzling touchdowns, and there is more of that where that came from, with Deshaun Watson at quarterback emerging as a true stud. The offense is going to be put in a position, because the injuries that they got on defense, the offense is going to have to score more points than they did last week. I mean, it's just all there for this guy to be a fantasy relevant, solid flex, if not number 2 receiver from here on out.
Their defense was ranked in the middle of the pack before they lost J.J. Watt, and so now it's just going to slip a little bit more, and these guys are going to hopefully hook up a lot going down the stretch, because they're guys that I was able to add in my fantasy league because I watched That Football Show with those fantasy guys. I know the guys. Last week I told you to start Kendall Wright, and it all started out rosy. He had 5 targets, 4 catches for 46 yards in the first half, and then for some reason they just decided to start throwing to Zach Miller, and he stole the other 50 yards and the touchdown that Kendall Wright should have gotten. So I still think he's a guy that you keep on your roster. Again, sure hands. He's only not converted on, I think, 5 of his pass attempts. So he catches almost everything that comes in his direction. And I think that maybe the defense rolled coverage his way and they took him away, and that's why they went to Zach Miller. But Mitchell Trubisky should lean on Kendall Wright moving forward. He is the de facto number 1 wide receiver on that team. So he's a guy you can at least put on your bench. And I am going to make up for it this week, and I'm going to tell you how in just a second. But Jay is going to tell you how he's going to fail this week.
All right. Well, I just wanted to point out that Mitchell Trubisky did look awesome, and I think what you're talking about, Kendall, right, moving forward is definitely a good spot.
Well, I'm sorry about saying that you're going to fail, but your pick is in direct conflict to my pick this week.
I did not realize that, but what I'm saying is I'm going against one of the worst defenses in the league.
Love the idea.
Anderson. He's only owned in 28% of
the
leagues.
guy.
Started in 15%. He has 14 receptions for 220 yards and like a 90-yard touchdown on the year. He might actually double that production in this game against the Patriots. He could go for, 15, 16, 400 yards because he has Madden certified speed, and the Patriots don't have anybody that can keep up with him.
So here you go. We're going to put it on the line now. People are going to have to decide whether they're a Jay guy or a Rick guy.
So we're going to say, are people battling for the playoffs or battling to get in the playoffs?
So my point is that I love the teams that you picked and the game that you picked, and I even love the Jets side of things. I don't love the wide receiver. I understand because the New England defense is terrible, probably the worst I've ever seen. And the number 2 wide receiver does amazingly well against them. However, the number 2 wide receiver for the New York Jets is not a wide receiver at all. It's Austin Seferian-Jenkins. Now, he's still owned in only 63% of leagues, which is unbelievable to me because I told you all to go out and add him in week number 3. I don't know why you haven't. But if you did, this is the week to start him. I started him last week and got exactly what I was looking for, that touchdown right there. This week, he plays the New England Patriots, as you know. And this week, the New England Patriots, not this week, all season, the New England Patriots have had trouble defending players down the middle of the field. Well, guess what? That's where all 6'5", 235 pounds of this monster lives, is down the middle of the field. He is going to destroy the Patriots defense this week, unfortunately because I'm a Patriots fan, but fortunately because I'm an Austin Seferian-Jenkins owner. Now, if you just can't decide between me and Jay, and you can't draw that line, you just love us both so much, I'll tell you what, they play different positions. You can start them both because that's how good this matchup is. I don't even need, I love to get into stats. I'm not even going to do it. The Patriots are bad. They're giving up the most passing yards, the most passing touchdowns in the NFL. They're just terrible. Start everybody that plays the Patriots, although they did look good against your Bucks.
That was nice of them to step up against my Bucks. I really appreciate that.
Let's move on to tough sets.
Sit down, Waldo.
Last week I told you to sit Keenan Allen. Bullseye. He had 12 targets. I mean, that's opportunity right there. Tons of opportunity. What did he do with that opportunity?
Tons of opportunity.
4 receptions, 67 yards, 0 touchdowns. I'm telling you what, that dreaded West Coast to East Coast 1 o'clock game is no joke. Told you to sit Keenan Allen. Hopefully you found other options and started those.
Absolutely.
Like Will Fuller.
Like Will Fuller would have been a good substitution for Keenan Allen last week. Last week I told you to sit down Jordan Howard, and you scoffed at me. And not only that, but it was a little weird because it was the first time where I had a sneaky start and a tough sit in the same game. But here's the thing. Howard on 19 carries only had 79 yards. And in a PPR league, that's a decent start. But it's not what you're looking for from a number 1 running back. You're looking for a touchdown and those 79 yards. Couldn't get it done. Jay, who you got this week?
This week I'm coming right at a top 5 pick overall. This guy went in the top 5 picks of every draft out there. He's the number 1 rated wide receiver pre-draft. I'm going at Antonio Brown. Ooh. I'm telling you what, Big Ben, I don't know what's going on in his head. Preseason, he was thinking about retirement. Mid-season, he's saying he might have lost it. I don't know what's going on, but if Big Ben can't get out of his own head, it's only going to affect Antonio Brown's numbers. He just hucked it up last week. That's all he was doing, closing his eyes, throwing up prayers, and those prayers were answered by the Jacksonville Jaguars going the other way for touchdowns.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you what, we talk about opportunity. Big Ben gives Antonio Brown all the opportunity in the world, but closing your eyes and hucking it up is not the answer I'm looking for. Marcus Peters is going to follow him all over the field, and he is going to shut him down. If you have other options, like Will Fuller, go that way this week.
Antonio Brown, not for nothing, the most targeted wide receiver in the NFL. I think he has almost 50 targets.
That's opportunity, but what was he have? 1 touchdown?
Yeah, but ton of yards, but not many touchdowns. Jay, this week I feel a little uneasy about my picks from last week. They didn't really cash out. The tough sit wasn't really that tough of a sit. I guess he didn't really underperform as much as I had hoped. And my sneaky start was a little bit not so sneaky of a start. So Jay, this week on Tough Sits, I got 2 of them for you.
Twofer.
It's a twofer. Ready? Here we go. Last week I told you to buy low on Aaron Jones. Should have been my sneaky start. If you did, you got a shiny new toy we play with, but let's not get cute. This week, Green Bay travels to Minnesota, and Jones will have to contend with a Minnesota defense that has allowed only 80 rushing yards per game, dramatic pause, and 1 rushing touchdown this season. Just 1 in 5 games. In week 2, they held Le'Veon Bell to 87 yards on 27 carries. Last week, they held Jordan Howard to 19 carries for 79 yards. I like Aaron Jones to be involved in this Green Bay offense going forward based on what he did last week, but not this week. And oh, by the way, Ty Montgomery practiced today, and he is the starter in Green Bay until further notice, even with that breakout. My second person on the twofer, Jay, you're going to love this one, Alex Smith.
He could be the MVP.
Alex Smith could be the MVP so far. He has 121 attempts, completions for 158 yards, 1,300 yards, 11 touchdowns, and no interceptions. Let's give credit where credit's due. Alex Smith has been playing better than he ever has. Ever. He's carrying fantasy teams to this point, and he's trying to make a star out of Tyreek Hill. But let's take a look at the defenses he's faced this season. Week 1, New England,
terrible.
368 yards passing, 4 touchdowns, ranked 32nd in the NFL. Week 2, 251 yards, 1 touchdown, ranked 29th against the pass. Week 3, the LA Chargers, 155 yards, 2 touchdowns, ranked 4th best against the pass. Week 5, the Washington Redskins, 239, 1 touchdown, ranked 15th. And last week, Houston, 324, 3 touchdowns, ranked 13th. He's only played middle-of-the-pack defenses except for week 3 when he only had 155 yards.
And 2 touchdowns.
He was able to sluggo 2 touchdowns in on a 155-yard day to save his production, to save his MVP status, right? But this week he gets the Pittsburgh Steelers, which will be his toughest test yet. The Pittsburgh Steelers bring to town their number 1 passing defense, Jay, on the season. The Pittsburgh Steelers, are you ready?
I'm ready.
Have allowed 139 yards passing per game, 3 touchdowns, and 5 interceptions through 5 weeks.
That sounds like what Jacksonville did against them last week.
Boom! I'm just saying. Alex Smith, let's put it this way. If I'm wrong and Alex Smith can move the ball and have a good fantasy day against the Steelers defense, then he is a no-doubt start for the rest of the season, much like Matt Ryan was last year. But this is the test. This is the litmus test, if you will. This week is when you're going to decide if Alex Smith can do this for the rest of the season, because this is going to be his toughest test yet.
All right, I can't wait to see the results.
Me neither, and those are my twofers. Let's go move on to Wall Street. Who do you have for us today on Wall Street?
Did you catch any of that 49ers game last week?
Unfortunately, I did.
Did you? I didn't see any of it. I couldn't bear to watch that. But one thing I do know is that the snaps were way closer to 50-50 between Carlos Hyde and Matt Breida than I could have possibly imagined.
Absolutely.
He's faster. He was in there in the 3rd and 4th quarter and overtime. If you're in there in the 3rd, 4th quarter and overtime and you have 50% of the snaps, that means the other guy had the 50% in the first half and you may now have taken over his job. So I'm saying buy low. The 49ers are not a great team, but I think they're looking for answers, and this guy might be one of your answers. He might be your lottery ticket as far as a big play guy come the playoffs time. So buy low on him right now. You'll have a couple of weeks to gauge if he's taken over the starting position, and if he has, you got yourself a starting running back for the fantasy playoffs.
As a Carlos Hyde owner,
you should be nervous.
You should be nervous, and we talked about Matt a little bit earlier in the season. This is not the first time you've heard his name. We told you to buy low on him if you are a Hyde owner, just because of the injury factor. which is what I believe is driving this. I think for some reason the coaching staff doesn't want to come out and say that Carlos Hyde is more injured than he is. I think he's playing with an injury. I think Hyde is clearly the better running back. I think that Hyde carried that offense early in the season and deserves to be the starter in San Francisco. But I'm also biased because I'm a Carlos Hyde owner. But I think that injury has a little bit to do with this. However, the head coach there has had times where he likes to run 2 running backs a la Atlanta with Devontae Freeman and Tevin Coleman. I mean, he ran them both with great success. So unfortunately, there may be a timeshare in the works up in San Francisco.
Well, that's fine. If you can get the results out of Freeman and Coleman, out of these 2 guys, then getting Bradilla is a fine because Coleman carried teams for a couple of seasons.
I don't think the production is going to be the same because, unfortunately, the 49ers don't have Matt Ryan. Unfortunately for the 49ers, they don't have Matt Ryan.
Or Julio Jones.
So I think the production is going to be a little different, but I do think that this is going to be a little bit of a timeshare going forward, which is the most unfortunate words in fantasy football. Jay, this week I'm going to tell you to go out and add a guy for a team that's desperately looking to win a game. And not only that, but they're quarterbacked by the future Hall of Famer, Phillip Rivers. Jay, Mike Williams is oozing with potential and talent. And let me tell you what, this 6'2", 220-pound man with hands like baseball gloves is going to provide a big play spark for that offense. And once you get Keenan Allen and Mike Williams on the field and Hunter Henry down the middle, teams are going to have to decide. And I think they're going to go with Allen and Hunter because they're the proven receiving options, and Mike Williams is going to be running wild in that secondary.
So you're saying that future Hall of very good player Phillip Rivers could have a good second half of the season?
I think that he's had a good first half of the season if you take away the interceptions for football and fantasy purposes. Outside of that, he's had a very good start to the season. I think he's like 4th overall. They're passing the ball 40 times a game. Even with Melvin Gordon on that team, they're still passing the ball 40 times a game because they're in constant catch-up mode. They cannot get a lead on anyone, and when they do, they can't keep it. So for all of those reasons, go out and add Mike Williams. Let's move on to Weekly League Zone. By the way, you can get him for like nothing right now because he's not. Jay, you're knocking it dead this year. Why don't you tell us who you had last week?
Last week I told you to start T.Y. Hilton. I told you 2 things about T.Y. Hilton. He's a buy low candidate before Andrew Luck comes back. I hope you bought low on him when you got a chance because after his 7 receptions on 9 targets and 177 yards, the price you're going to have to pay just went up. So he had a great week. For the price you pay in a weekly league for a guy like T.Y. Hilton, you were able to put a great team around him.
Well, let me tell you one thing. You were dead right about the amount of yardage that he had, and that's a ton. 177 out of a wide receiver is more than you could ask for. He's worth every penny you paid for him last week. However, you did say he was going to have 2 touchdowns.
Did I?
Yeah.
All right,
but you know what? We'll take 177 yards instead.
Every time.
Let's move on to this week. Who you got?
This week, I'm going on a bye. I think we mentioned something about this earlier. Joe Mixon, I said after he comes back from his bye week, he's going to be the man going forward. I think we might be looking at the same exact situation in Nola. They just traded Adrian Peterson. And the reason why they traded Adrian Peterson, he doesn't fit their system at all. I don't even know why he signed there. I don't know why they signed him. But you know who does fit his system? Alvin Kamara. He's fast. He's a jitterbug. He catches the ball out of the backfield. And I think he may be the starter after the bye week, more so than he's not moving forward. So hopefully you got him. And if you do have him, this is a week to play him off the bye week. I'm guaranteeing they put in plays to showcase him off the bye week. He's going to have a great game. He's going to have, I'm going to say, 78 yards rushing, 65 yards receiving, and 2 touchdowns.
Woo! Going with the 2 touchdowns.
Maybe one each, 1 receiving, 1 rushing.
I will tell you that I saw some ridiculous stats on Drew Brees today. I don't have them here in front of me, so don't quote me. But coming off of a bye week, playing at home in 11 games, Drew Brees has something like 34 touchdowns, 360 yards that he's averaging per game, and like no interceptions. So Drew Brees coming out of the bye is just about as good as anyone. So I like the pick. Hopefully he gets your yardage for you and you continue this dominance that you've been showing on Weekly Leagues. Jay, let's move on to the Facebook question before we run out of time. If you have a Facebook question, you can send it to us. Look us up at That Football Show with those fantasy guys. Jay, this is a threefer. Rodrigo says, should I pick up AP? Can I roll with him right away? What do you expect from him out of Arizona?
No, nothing.
Okay, perfect. That's all the time we have for today's show. We'll see you next time on TFS. Until next time, we are That Football Show with those fantasy guys.